All right, hi everyone, and welcome to our 10th end of work cycle update for stakeholders. Thank you so much for joining us today, whether you're here on Zoom live or you're watching this as a recording later. We really appreciate both your interest and continued support of our collaborative project. These updates came out of stakeholder feedback. Many of you told us it was helpful to have regular high-level summaries at the end of each of our work cycles. So that's what we're here to do, to give you a concise look at what we've accomplished over the past work cycle. Just a quick reminder, for more detailed updates, we do hold a sprint review and demo at the end of each of our formal sprints, and we always share those sessions via the blog. We post both the recording and a written recap. And so if you're interested in digging in a little bit deeper to any of the work we do, please go check out the blog. Also, before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. We are, as you may have noticed, recording this meeting. So please stay muted unless you're speaking to help keep the audio clear. Also, if you don't want to be on video, as a recording, you may want to turn off your videos unless you're speaking. If any questions come up while we're presenting, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We're going to hold off on answering them just so we can keep things moving along efficiently. But we should have plenty of time for questions at the end. So just a really quick update about the agenda. So we're going to start off, Michael and I, just giving you a recap of the work cycle, when we worked, what the goals were. Then we'll dive in a little bit more to what was accomplished in each of those goals by our product teams. So we'll hear from the Daylight team, Alex talking about infrastructure and environments, our Comet team, and then we'll wrap up by talking about what's next, or actually what's going on right now. And then we have lots and lots of time for questions. All right, so work cycle overview. Our second work cycle of 2025 started on April 2nd and ran through June 2nd. As a quick reminder, we shifted to a new work cycle cadence at the beginning of the year. So we're now running our work cycles back to back with either a 2 to 3 week buffer, depending on holidays in between each one. This work cycle was also the first where we experimented with a new sprint cadence. So we're doing 3 3-week sprints instead of 4 2-week sprints. And this change came out of our team feedback. Folks shared that they felt like they needed a little bit more time in each sprint, especially to meet with our stakeholders and our subject matter experts and really dig into those user requirements before jumping into implementation. So far, the feedback from the team is that this has been a really positive change that's working. The extra time has also made it a little bit easier to align our schedules, have all of those necessary conversations, and then still complete the work within a single sprint. It's also allowed us to be a little bit more efficient with our sprint meetings. Planning sessions, sprint reviews happen in every sprint. So by having less sprints over about the same duration, we're also using the team's time more efficiently. So far, like I said, the response has been really positive, and we plan to stick with this approach for the rest of the year. So now I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk a little bit more about what our goals were for this work cycle.
Thanks, Chrissy. So I think I'd like to start with kind of an overview of what the first very bulleted point there includes. And that is, we wanted to sort of demo a connected system, taking our applications from component applications to kind of an integrated system, really focusing around our discovery. And so what that meant was a really intentional focus around realizing the architecture implementations of those, and really around 2 core areas. I think that's really the API data consumption and sort of marrying those with components, which we've heard our Daylight team talk about, to see how those are presented, and get that life cycle working. And that life cycle is really important, I think, not only to our work cycle goals this work cycle, but also our upcoming ones. And so the reason this is bolded is we want to give an indication of where and to what extent our efforts went in this work cycle. And that one was a big one. So not only was it a large amount of effort, but is also relative to what would move us forward functionally. That was a really big step. And I think today in the demos, we're going to start to be able to realize that and see what that looks like. So I'm delighted to share that with you. And I think the team's done a great job. So shout out to them ahead of time. I think coupled with that, I think we were also working on our environment designs, which at the request, I think, of our stakeholders, like what could we do to make our environments easier to sort of test across life cycles, another core theme. And so this is something that is going to make our efforts as we move to like feature validation and actually testing across sort of publication discovery much more tight and integrated, which is essential to, again, making sure we're sort of meeting our core efforts of moving these things into a production environment. At the same time, we've been balancing moving forward essential comment work based of our sort of feature matrices and backlog prioritizations for our respective campus MVP implementations. And we've also been working in the background as good sustainable partners, like to reduce some technical debt, right? And I'm going to share some of this, leave a little bit of meat on the bone here for our technical team who should be very proud of their accomplishments in this, right? Not only sort of contributions upstream, but also making sure that like future us will be very thankful for how we manage these things once we are in production. So I hope that's a good overview. I think we'll try and keep this nice and short. Chrissy, if there's nothing else, maybe we should hand it over to the Daylight team.
Hello, my name's Elisa Pierce. I am one of the campus tech leads and PO for Daylight. I wanted to show you some of the work that we've done. As Michael just mentioned, we were anticipating an API endpoint, and so we wanted to make sure that our components were ready to be able to ingest that data that'll come over from those API endpoints. If you would like, I could share my screen and show you some of these components. All right, so up first, we started to work on each of the components in our component library to ensure that they were accessible and responsive. And so this one is an example of our pagination, our complex pagination, that allows us to have also a big screen and a small screen view. We have a featured list component that we worked on. We got a lot of work done here in the object viewer, which allows for multiple different ways for an object to show all of its different files that could be associated to it. We worked on our metadata and some accessibility there, our quick links. Again, just ensuring that we have keyboard accessible functionality throughout any of the components that would require that. But what this allowed us to do is really prep for our ADR Lite version. And so here's our eyebrow. And our endpoint. And so this is the endpoint. This is what we were hoping for in our work cycle. We wanted to be able to ingest the data. This data comes from a comment. And so now we have a way to ingest this into our web pages. Daylight here is putting together our eyebrow component. This is an ADR Lite page, so we have customization here that's specific to ADR Lite branding. We have our search bar component, we have an applied parameters component, and then a list of data that is now being filled by that API endpoint with objects that are hosted in Comet. So this is fun. So this all works. If I change things, it goes. We're starting to work on the next phase so that these actually click into the object and the components and all of its information. So that is coming up in our next sprint. And let's see, I think this might be the cherry on the top. So this is, again, ADR Lite. This is a UCSB discovery platform that we are using Daylight components to build out. And then we'll have objects hosted from Comet. So this is what we've done on the development side. But what we've also done in the Daylight team is built out Figma. And so I will let Chris give you insight onto Figma and our Figma development.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello, everyone. Chris Lopez. anybody meeting me for the first time, I'm the design engineer with the digital experience team at UC San Diego Library. And as Elisa was alluding to, also collaborating with the Daylight team, we have been working in Figma to basically bring in the methodology of content strategy, user-centered design within our micro front-end goals within Daylight. And Figma, a UX UI design platform, has been very central to our own team's goals and doing our own design work. And so our team at Daylight thought it might be helpful to kind of bring the light design system light type of Figma tool to the Daylight team that then could be kind of ported over to every campus that utilizes the Daylight components. And starting out, we took this atomic design approach that's kind of basically identifying, and a lot of the components you'll see, they were mainly designed kind of after the fact that of some of the design of the development team's work. So that's why everything looks very similar to it. Sometimes, usually it's the other way around, but this at least helps us get an idea of, okay, what are those individual like small unit components or like subcomponents of our UI within Daylight that we're thinking about. And here we get to imagine the variant stages. What does a drop down look like when it's open? What is a button doing if it's inline versus kind of laid out in the block level? So this gives us a chance just to, one, kind of visualize what are these small unit pieces. And then from there, I was able to kind of combine it again, following atomic design principles. You get into this stage of molecules, those atoms brought together. And again, this gives us that opportunity to, one, not have to change things in a lot of different places as we begin to wireframe out, envision different ways, evolving these kind of very generic baseline designs for the UI, just making a change to the molecule, whether that's how it looks, its color, its shape, right? That gives us that opportunity to do it in one place and then have that change multiplied throughout our different molecules or different wireframes. And so part of this kind of out of the box kind of Figma Daylight tool is some of the various templates or pages that are kind of combined with our various component molecules here. And again, the idea is that this gives the local campus the opportunity to know what they're working with out of the box, but then without having to jump into the code right away to make the customizations or change some of the look and feel behavior. Some of that work can start here and hopefully catalyze those design and development conversations at the local level. And what's nice with, if some of you all worked with the digital experience team, you know that we love Figma. We also love the prototype tool. So it's nice is when you bring in all your Figma components in, you can then start to basically kind of create this demo of some of like the user behavior that you would expect users to kind of move through as they kind of work through the various components in concert together. And so what's nice, we love this tool because it's a design ready, almost like this is what we would, if we could just code it like with the snap of the finger, like this is what it would look like. How are we feeling about it? What would we want to change? How would we address pain points that we know that have come up in previous user conversations? So that's a feature of Figma that we really enjoy using. And one of the great parts about it is this is like a great tool, the Figma prototype, they call it, as a way to get good stakeholder feedback in terms of like, I wasn't expecting the UI to this, or this is missing here. So we do love that feature about Figma, and that the prototype tool can create opportunities for good discussion, things that were missed. And we're excited that both coming out of Daylight is not only something shareable on the development side, but something that's shareable on the design side. And yeah, we're hoping that it inspires good collaboration between design and development, and exciting that this has the opportunity to be so generative. So thank you, Lisa. And I think it's David next.
Yeah, if I could have the slides back. So let's go a little farther. So the big accomplishment on the back end was getting all these components that Elisa and Chris and David Trujillo have been working on for all these months, actually pulling real data from real systems. So really excited to have gotten there. And because this is where we really get to being able to build like getting to a place where we can build the kind of discovery environments that that each campus wants, as opposed to just taking what you get out of the box with something like Blacklight. The first version of this is is what we're calling ADRL Lite, which is the immediate goal is to let us retire the Alexandria Digital Research Library site here at UC Santa Barbara. But it's also so this first version is very much just kind of the following the look and feel and interaction design of the existing ADRL, but it's also a platform that lets us prototype all the technologies we need for the next generation discovery systems on both campuses that we're looking forward to sinking our teeth into. So yeah, and there's still work to do there this summer, but it's coming along, and it's really great to see actual data populating these components. Next slide, I guess, unless you want to talk about this stuff, Elisa.
I think you actually covered it really nicely there. So one of the benefits of using ADRL Lite is that we're able to not be bogged down by those little design decisions that come from redoing or revamping or redesigning any website. So we have all of our decisions, our layouts, we have everything ready for us. So it allows us to more quickly move using our new Daylight components and the integrated backend. So I'm really excited to see that move along and get all the other components hooked up. And so that's what we'll do pretty much this summer is we're going to focus on making ADRL Lite functioning. And that's it for Daylight.
All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Alex to talk about the work that was done during this past work cycle on the infrastructure and the environments. And a huge shout out to the Daylight team too. This has been really awesome work during this past work cycle.
Hi, I'm Alex. I am the digital library architect at UCSB. And so as we've been getting closer to kind of a production setup, we spent some time rethinking how we want to deploy not only production, but also the various test environments that we use. So we need librarians, other stakeholders, and as well as developers to be able to actually test code before it is live to the public. So previously we had review deployments, which were just to test out new code before it's actually even approved and merged into the repository. And then we had a staging site, which was more a mirror of production. And then we had production. That ended up not being quite as flexible as we wanted. So we have a new environment, which I'll go over on the next slide. And we also kind of modified the kind of the steps of code review from code review to production. So previously, a developer would open a merge request with some new code. It would be reviewed, tested, and then merged. And immediately upon merging, it would be pushed to production. We decided that was a bit too automatic. And so now there's a manual step of actually deploying the code to production because things do slip through the cracks. And then we've been setting up new environments for these intermediate instances that we have. There's also been some technical debt, which I won't get into the details of, but we've been simplifying how we use fits, which is a tool to characterize the images that we upload to describe their metadata. And it's not the best piece of software, so it's been a bit of a challenge trying to get it to run effectively in our Kubernetes environment. And then we've been consolidating some of the shared infrastructure we use, like Solr and Postgres. Previously, we would run a whole new Solr cluster for each application. That was extremely inefficient. And so now we have, at least on the UCSB end, for each kind of environment, we have a single Solr cluster that all of the associated applications use. And so that's been making things both a lot faster to set up because we don't have to actually create a new cluster every time, and also saves us money. So the next slide has details about the new application environments. So like before, the review deployments are temporary instances for code that's still under review. So if you ever use the GitLab interface, when a merge request is opened, there's a button to deploy a review application. So you can actually go and look at what the code will look like once it's merged. And these are just ephemeral instances that once everything is checked off and merged into the repository, they're torn down again. So they're just kind of temporary test environments. QA is, we got rid of what we called staging. Now there's QA, which is automatically deployed when new code is approved and merged. So it runs the very latest of everything for, like the name implies, quality assurance. Also for demoing and just for testing to make sure everything actually works in a more stable environment than those review applications. Production is production. Once everything looks good in QA, we do that manual process of deploying to production. And then Sandbox is a new instance that we realized we had a need for. After production is manually deployed, Sandbox is automatically pushed out as well. The idea is that it mirrors production as close as possible. So primarily so that librarians and other stakeholders can basically prepare collections or test things in a exact production environment before they do something in production. It can also be used for training new users, whereas QA is more development focused because it's not running the exact same code, and it's more likely to have bugs that haven't been filtered out yet. So that's kind of the new way things look. I think there's one more slide. Yes, so there's a little diagram showing how this works. Feel free to peruse it at your leisure. And I think that's about all I have. What was left on that slide? Oh yeah, just this progress report. So currently UCSB has QA environments. San Diego hasn't set that up yet because we're not entirely sure if every institution needs QA. As long as there's one set of QA instances, that might be good enough for us. But we are both setting up our Sandbox instances because we are going to have enough differences that for training and so on, you're going to want to use your institution's sandbox. And I think that's all I have. Chrissy?
Thanks, Alex. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to David to give us a comment update.
Okay. Comet is, as we left it in the end of the last work cycle, it's in pretty good shape feature-wise. There's a few nooks and crannies we're filling in. We're also, since we've been doing more testing, we've been uncovering some issues and fixing those, which is great. It's good that people are getting their hands on the system. We've got some of these slightly more complex use cases that we're starting to dig into, like nested resources where you have like multiple complex values for metadata fields on a single object. Maintaining the order of items as they're imported from a bulk import spreadsheet, that kind of thing. So we've settled on exactly what we want to do there, and we've moved the work forward, and it'll continue this summer. In terms of technical debt on the application side, Alex talked about some of the infrastructure technical debt. We've been working on improving the reliability of our tests, adding some tests at essential areas, and we're now tracking test coverage. So as we move forward, we'll be looking to get those numbers up. And we also have, we've kind of been playing leapfrog with the upstream Hyrax and Samvera community on some of the tools we're using where sometimes we needed something before it was ready up there and we have our own version. And then since then, they've moved forward and now maybe theirs is a little more advanced than ours in some areas, or we're just at the point where they're ready to have us contribute those features back. So we've started doing that with some of the work that Longshu did on versioning and some bug fixes that we made around kind of somewhat more like slightly more complex use cases than the upstream code was expecting in terms of multiple files per object and that sort of thing. So that's been moving forward. We also took a look, Bulkrax is the library that we use for the bulk uploads. And we're actually a couple of versions behind on that now. It was not moving very fast, but then it has been moving more in the last year or two. But it's still most of that work has been focusing on people who still use the Fedora repository as their backend rather than a database, the way we do. So there's some areas where it's ahead of us, some areas where it's still a little behind. We did some analysis on what it would take to get kind of back on track there and just some preliminary work and decided that it's not something we're going to pursue now, but it may be something we'll be looking at in the fall or the winter. Next slide, please. Some of the things we got done in terms of features this this work cycle. We now have proper support for version files. You can upload new versions. You can roll back to old versions. We've added some enhancements to file characterization, which is the static analysis of the files when you upload them, which Alex alluded to, talking about fits. It's very important in digital preservation. You want to know exactly what kinds of files you have, what all you have in your repository. And related to that is calculating a checksum, which lets you go back and check your files later and make sure that the data hasn't become corrupted or that each version of a file is the version that you think it is. This is one of those areas where we're a little more ambitious than a lot of other Hyrax sites, where the kind of classic use case for a Hyrax application is you upload a high resolution image and Hyrax generates maybe a thumbnail and a lower resolution version of that file for people to download. And that's that. Whereas we have some much more complex cases with different kinds of data where we might have multiple files that we upload into the system and then creating maybe a wider spectrum of different kinds of derivative files from those than people were expecting. So we've done a bunch of work to make the file characterization and fixity checking more robust to handle those use cases. As far as other things, testing and bug fixes and enhancements, the system tests they're still not perfect, but they're a lot more reliable than they were 6 months ago. We're now validating the metadata schema when we start up, so we know that that hasn't gotten messed up in some way. We fixed some issues with events firing out of order that were causing some unexpected errors. And we've made some small but important kind of quality of life and user experience improvements, making certain pieces of the application work a little more smoothly than they used to. Next slide, please. So going forward this summer, we're going to finish up the work on nested resources, making sure that that works both when uploading a file through the UI, but also, and probably more importantly, when doing a bulk upload from a spreadsheet. Going to make sure that when you do an upload from a spreadsheet, we preserve the order of the files you want, which is critical if you're coming from an existing system, especially for the migration from UC San Diego, where you can't count on it. It's not practical to say, all right, we're just going to rename all our files so we can sort them in alphabetical order. You want to be able to specifically say, no, these things are in this order for a reason, and when we upload them, they should stay in that order. And then we have some more now that people are getting their hands on the system. We have some features and requirements that were sort of identified in principle a year or two or years or farther back, that now we're just getting into the specifics of, like exactly what does it mean that this is the original file? What do we expect the system to do with that? When we publish to discovery platforms, how do we decide what gets published where? What does it mean to publish a collection as opposed to publishing the objects in a collection? Who should be able to publish what to where, at what point in the workflow? How much do we want the system to kind of put guardrails on that, and how much do we want to keep it flexible and trust users to to be trained and use their own expertise? There are some areas of the UI where that need some more interaction design and user interface attention. We may or may not get to those this summer because the UX and UI folks are pretty busy with discovery, but they're on our radar for if there's some slack in their schedule, we will look at those. Next slide. I think that was it.
Thank you, David, and thanks again to everybody on the team for just really a fantastic work cycle. It's been really exciting to see all of the pieces come together, especially seeing that discovery prototype has been really wonderful. I'm just going to talk really briefly about our third work cycle, which this meeting is about a week later than it normally would be scheduled due to some folks on the team being on vacation. So we've actually already started our third work cycle this past Wednesday on June 18th. Again, this will be three-week sprints wrapping up on Tuesday, August 19th. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michael to share more about what our goals are.
Thanks, Chrissy. Well, very similar to last work cycle's goals, we have kind of the next iteration of these. And I think for us, the connected system concept, that's moving the discovery prototype to something that's really can be deployed into production in sort of both campus spaces, and we can start to really answer and pencil in some questions about what does this really look like, both from sort of like the design and the content side. That's going to be really, really cool. I think in addition, we're going to be making still progress, I think, on the API and data connectivity side of those. And as well on the component side, I know we have work slated for, like, for example, for the IIIF component. And so I think we'll be able to start to answer things like, how do these components behave in a connected discovery prototype, which is really exciting, especially when you start to thread that needle with like the Figma and sort of the design aspect that sort of Chris brought up earlier today that the Daylight team's been thinking about. So that's very exciting. I think we're also going to be working on our comment features that we heard a little bit about, specifically sort of the configurable metadata and nested resources, access control, and a couple of different lights. And as well, finishing up our environment design efforts to really try and get us to that feature validation point with QA. And we're going to be doing some sort of intelligent prioritization and asking some questions like, to what extent do we need to implement preview environments in this work cycle? And what would be the cost of doing those against our other more, like, if those are other more important goals, like the connected version? How should we prioritize our engineering time? And as well, I think a very important one is how are we going to sort of release in production and sandbox when it comes time, so that we don't interrupt an ongoing ingest, or sort of like let's practice that before it happens. And so that'll be both really exciting and very important, given the environment changes. And of course, there's always reducing a little bit of technical debt ahead of it, so it doesn't become overwhelming. And again, I think in this case, the majority of our work is going to come in those first two big bullet points, probably front-loaded with the connected version of those discovery prototypes. Again, really functionally moving us forward quite a bit as Comet completes its feature status. And I think at that point, that'll be a successful work cycle.
All right, sorry, my mouse is really touchy, and I have to remind myself constantly, Chrissy, don't touch your mouse when you're running the slides. But I think that is it in terms of our update. Just a reminder, we are very, very active on Slack, so if you have questions, feel free to join us in the UC Tech Surfliner channel, or Surfliner Announce if you're more interested in just lower volume updates from the team. A reminder, we do have a blog, surfliner.ucsd.edu. This is where we share the recordings and updates from the team on a regular basis. And then as always, you're welcome to reach out to me or Michael directly if you have any other questions. So speaking of questions, we'd love to answer some of yours if you have any. And feel free to either put them in the chat or unmute yourself, raise your hand however you want. And I can ask again for questions after we stop the recording. I'm just gonna leave a little space here. I know folks might be typing or... All right, well, we can now look at our lovely Surfliner logo. See if you can spot the shark that's hidden in the background. Chrissy will stop touching her mouse. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us. Like I said at the beginning, we do really appreciate you being here and supporting the team through your presence and your questions and your feedback. Very much appreciated. All right, do you want to stop the recording, Gabriella?
I will.